Not a thing. I just came in to get warm.
He's making violent love to me, Mother.
I've heavily debated this. When it comes to classic Christmas movies, storylines so iconic you probably know them even if your generation's never seen it, It's a Wonderful Life is definitely one of those things. The other is A Christmas Carol, both of which have been referenced to death, but unlike A Christmas Carol, that began life as a novel in 1843, and has had countless adaptations including animation, Disney, Muppets, comedy, a gender-swapped version with William Shatner. A Wonderful Life was merely based off of the short story, The Greatest Gift. Well, technically started as a Christmas card, but that's another story, and by some miracle has not been touched since. Give or take a few musicals and some irrelevant TV movies, this is a rare example of a classic film avoiding the Hollywood remake machine. The colored version you're seeing now is about as close as you'll get, making this, at least for the time being, a truly untouchable classic movie. But why is that? To be completely honest, I feel it will happen eventually. I mean, nowadays, anything can. But the question is, does it deserve that status? Is it really as good as a film that literally has its own museum? It definitely wasn't as successful at first until the 1970s on TV, but when it comes to the criticism that does exist for this movie, I don't think there's any connection there. In case you're wondering, I am leaning slightly, and I mean slightly, in that direction. I don't by any means dislike this movie, but I do have some things to say about it. What you've got to keep in mind is despite this being a Christmas movie, I don't think it's the main focus. Director Frank Capra thought the same thing, and when you really think about it, you could eliminate the Christmas theme completely, and it wouldn't be that different. It would change a few scenes, but the main focus would still be there. That's kind of my whole thing. The reason this movie is still popular today, still memorable, still impactful, is primarily due to its message. That being a man who never got the life he wanted for the benefit of others, commonly questioning if he made the right decisions, and in the end, almost throwing it away. Like I said, it's not exactly new. If you haven't seen the movie, you've probably heard it before, and that's for a good reason. But just because it's a non-remakeable classic movie doesn't mean it's completely perfect. I've wanted to discuss this for some time, and I think that time has come, so in the fear of making some people less than pleased, this is It's a Wonderful Life. The movie opens heavily towards the end, so that's where that cliche came from. And we hear two angels, Joseph and Franklin, voiced by Joseph Granby and Maroney Olsen respectively, which are oddly uncredited. I don't know why, I think it's classic stuff.
Whose turn is it?
That's why I came to see you, sir. It's a clockmaker's turn again.
They explain that George Bailey is contemplating some thing that I guess YouTube doesn't want me saying, because obviously this movie is not safe for all audiences. So they call upon the angel Clarence, played by Henry Travis, who has yet failed to get his wings, but having the heart of a child is the best way to deal with the serious issue at hand.
What are they wearing now?
You will spend that hour getting acquainted with George Bailey.
The whole movie is over 2 hours, and we're already past the halfway point, so I'd say more like an hour and 50 minutes. So we cut back to the beginning and see young George Bailey, played by Bobby Anderson, and his brother Henry, played by George Knox.
I'm not scared!
The visible hole is no big deal, and the Omen 2 isn't even a thing yet. It turns out sledding into an ice pond while not being able to swim is a bad idea, so George saves him, but in the process gets a cold, eventually costing him hearing in his left ear. And something I noticed about this recently is the narration doesn't seem to persist that much. It's heard a lot at the beginning, but you tend to hear it less once he becomes an adult. I suppose that's for a reason, but it's something you don't think about that much. Also, I heard this movie may have offended somebody and may have been considered for removal, so we may as well count the reasons why that might be. Reason number 1.
I like him. You like every boy. What's wrong with that?
Self-explanatory.
You've been canceled.
And I'm gonna have a couple of harems, and maybe 3 or 4 wives.
You've been canceled.
This is to show us that Mary loves him, now played by Jean Gale, and that he wants to go exploring someday, establishing events to come. He then saves his boss from accidentally poisoning somebody, which, despite being a great scene, is not completely irrelevant. It gets brought up again later, and they didn't have to do that. It could have just been a scene that establishes he's a good person, but the fact that it does affect something despite not being that relevant is a good thing. We then see Henry Potter, played by Lionel Barrymore, and yeah, even today, he's still extremely fun to hate in this.
Foreclosed.
I can't do that. These families have children.
They're not my children.
But they're somebody's children, Mr. Potter.
It's the kind of thing you would see a movie today try and imitate, and probably fail immensely at it. And while characters like this tend to not age the best, feeling overdone and of their time, I don't think that's the case here.
I am an old man, and most people hate me, but I don't like them either, so that makes it all even.
In fact, I'll knock the movie right now. The SNL ending should have happened. Come to think of it, why is there no comeuppance? I mean, this guy is an unredeemable asshole, along with being a thief, and aside from not winning, he doesn't really pay for it. If this does ever get remade, or a sequel, they really need to fix that. We cut to adult George, famously played by James Stewart, who Clarence seems to really like.
It's a good face. I like it. I like George Bailey.
Maybe a little too much, considering it's his first time seeing him. Now I'm really getting some bad remake vibes. We're introduced to Bert and Ernie, played by Ward Bond and Frank Phelan respectively, and adult Violet, played by Gloria Graham.
Hey, you look good. That's some dress you got on there.
What? This old thing? Well, I only wear it when I don't care how I look.
You've been canceled. You've been canceled.
So he has a conversation with his dad, played by Samuel S. Hines, and they come to the conclusion that him leaving after college may be the best idea.
This town is no place for any man unless he's willing to crawl to Potter. Now, you've got talent, son. I've seen it.
It's a scene you appreciate more upon rewatching because you know it's not going to happen that way, but I do like the fact that they're in agreement, opposed to something stupid like him insisting that he follow in his footsteps. He heads to Harry's graduation party, now played by Todd Kranz, and fuck it, this is probably offensive too.
You've been canceled.
This would be adult Mary, played by Donna Reed, and we have our famous dance scene, in which a couple of jealous guys think if they open up the pool, only George will fall in, even though there is no way they could possibly tell that. But of course, it has the opposite effect. As for the walk home, I should probably just let this one play out.
I guess I'm not quite the football type. You look wonderful.
You've been canceled.
How old are you anyway?
18.
18?
You've been canceled.
You look a little older without your clothes on.
You've been canceled.
This is a very interesting situation.
Please give me my robe.
You've been canceled.
He finds out his dad had a stroke, giving the dinner scene even more meaning, and soon after his death, he calls out Potter for insulting his dad's character.
Well, this town needs this measly one-horse institution, if only to have some place where people can come without crawling to Potter.
In my opinion, it's one of the best scenes in the movie, really making you dislike this guy in a realistic way, and again, it still holds up. Oh, just hang on a minute. Canceled? Well, you can't cancel that. I'll just, hang on. I'll just cancel that too. Well, you can still, like the video. No, you can't. Similar to disliking, that's also out. Subscribe. Offensive? This results in them not siding with Potter and keeping the building and loan going, but in return, he must take his father's place.
But George, they'll vote with Potter otherwise.
This is when you really get into what the movie's about, in which he once again must give up what he wants for the benefit of others. Yeah, he does think Harry's gonna take his place when he gets back from college, but instead he gets married, gets a new job, and upon hearing that it's a good job, he seems to be okay with it, but you can still feel how he's feeling, and that's what makes it so good. Unfortunately, we still need to mention this shit.
Excuse me.
Well, wait a minute.
I think I got a date. But, stick around, fellas, just in case, huh?
You've been canceled.
He goes to see Mary, in which they argue a bit due to his depressed mood, but they eventually make up and get married. Unfortunately, their honeymoon is cut short due to the ever-so inconvenient run on the banks, and in the end, he must give up most of their honeymoon savings to keep the building and loan solvent. Eventually, they establish Bailey Park, surpassing Potter's slums, and knowing he's been beat, he offers Bailey a job for $20 grand a year. He almost agrees to this until realizing what it would mean for the building and loan, and the scene when he tells him off is pretty damn good.
You sit around here and you spin your little webs and you think the whole world revolves around you and your money. Well, it doesn't, Mr. Potter.
You've also got to appreciate the way the room is set up, with him noticeably under him. I'm sure it's commonplace, but it does add to the feel of this. This does lead him to question his decisions until realizing his wife is pregnant, and a lot of other things happen, most notably his brother Harry as a Navy flyer, shooting down 15 planes and saving a transport full of soldiers. But, as you may have forgotten, this is a Christmas movie, and we've finally reached the point in which that's made clear. Mainly because it's Christmas. But then Uncle Billy, played by Thomas Mitchell, accidentally gives Potter the $8 grand deposit, and as you'd guess, he has no issue keeping it. Meaning, he technically didn't steal it, but, again, no comeuppance. I mean, maybe have him arrested at the end, or something? I'm gonna assume this offends somebody too.
You've been canceled.
And George doesn't take losing the $8 grand too well.
It means bankruptcy and scandal and prison. That's what it means.
And from this point on until the moment the movie began, it's pretty damn perfect. Realizing he's about to lose everything, he handles it about as well as you could expect.
Isn't it wonderful about Harry? You're famous, George.
He tries to keep it hidden, but inevitably loses it. And what I like about it is that none of it feels unreasonable. Aside from this, by maybe today's standards.
To have teachers like you, stupid, silly, careless people that send our kids home without any clothes on.
You've been canceled.
He eventually runs out and goes to beg Potter for money. It goes well.
You used to be so cocky. You were going to go out and conquer the world. You once called me a warped, frustrated old man.
He puts out a warrant for his arrest. And this may be as good a time as any to mention, this was actually shot in the summer during a heat wave. That would explain the heavy amounts of sweat, which do unintentionally benefit the scene, and even in color, it is pretty impressive. He eventually considers going for a swim in the middle of December, but Clarence jumps in instead, causing him to save him. He tells him he's his guardian angel, which he obviously doesn't believe, and eventually says he wishes he was never born.
Ridiculous of you to think of killing yourself for money. $8,000.
Yeah,
And this is when we finally go back to the point made at the beginning. He, of course, gives him his wish of not being born, but I just feel the whole thing should have been handled a little bit differently.
Are you out of your fucking mind?
Yes, what he considers doing is wrong, but let's think about this for a moment. George only did things for others, gave up everything he wanted, for the most part not to his benefit, and even though he is still content in the end, he's going to lose it all over a dumb mistake he didn't make, and probably go to jail. I guess what I'm saying is, I don't buy that he any longer has a wonderful life. I mean, maybe you know the ending, it hasn't happened yet, so you can't go by that. And if we didn't have that ending, and if he wasn't considering what he was considering, would they have just left it as it was? A man who did nothing but good things going to prison, and his life's work being destroyed? This is a moment that's desolate as fuck, and simply proving that his existence did a lot of good doesn't change the issue at hand. To make things simple, I would have preferred if the situation wasn't as bad. Something that may make you hate your life, but not something you couldn't turn around if you really wanted to. Because, let's face it, the ending that's about to happen is probably not what would happen, and given when this came out, I don't know why they felt the need to take it this far. If this came out today, I could kind of see it as doing something different, but back then, I just don't completely agree with it. And I know the idea of complaining about this is just insane to some people, and I did give it a lot of thought before proceeding, but in the end, it's just the way I feel. Like I said, it's not just a Christmas movie, so I feel it's okay to do that. That being said, it's also the only issue I have. Obviously, him not being born has a big effect on things, the town now being Pottersville, and even though it makes no sense that he refuses to believe it, as most of us would at that point, it's still a classic scene that I don't take any issue with, and the part when he finds out the effect it's had on his brother is especially good.
Every man on that transport died. Harry wasn't there to save them because you weren't there to save Harry.
Despite the impact that may have, this scene is still my favorite.
How old are you anyway, Clarence?
293. Next May.
That does it.
For whatever reason, that's just hilarious. And yeah, the whole thing is pretty damn good. And upon realizing that Mary became an old maid, which was actually foreshadowed, he eventually says he wants to live again.
My mouth's bleeding, Bert! My mouth's bleeding!
He embraces in the joy of going to prison. No, really, he does.
This is wonderful, I'm going to jail!
And we get our happy ending when the townspeople donate enough money to replace what's lost. Along with one more for the counter, because we're fucking stupid.
You've been canceled.
That being said, it's still a great ending. It's the ultimate payoff for his character that, despite what I've said, it's still a perfect ending that symbolizes everything this movie is about.
I wouldn't have a roof over my head if it wasn't for you, George.
Aside from Potter getting off scot-free, but we do still have the SNL ending, and who knows, it is possible a sequel will eventually happen, so at least we may see that. Anyway, that was It's a Wonderful Life. I know I'm in trouble. If you've been following me, you'll know I'm not a huge fan of reviewing famous movies that are undeniably good with almost no flaws, because there doesn't seem to be much of a point. You may think I'm doing this to complain about one thing, but to be honest, that's not the case. It was more so to look back on a film that I feel is legendary for a reason, even though at the time it wasn't, and explain how, despite being known as a Christmas movie, it would have still been just as good. Yes, I have my one flaw, which some people may share, but that really is not the focus here, and as for being an unremakeable classic movie, that status is undoubtedly deserved. I don't think that's that surprising. 99% of the movie is executed perfectly, and there's no denying it still holds up. Well, aside from 13 things that don't, but honestly, there is nothing else like it. I don't know how a sequel would do. A remake would be the worst idea in a long time, but as it stands, this is a movie everybody can and should see if they haven't, unless they're woke out of their minds. It's an unremakeable masterpiece that definitely needs to stay that way. I'm the analyst, and remember kids, making out with the woman without consent is not okay. Complimenting a woman's outfit without consent is also not okay. What the hell is going on? So, you've made it to the end. That's an impressive feat indeed. Since you managed that, I guess check out the gaming channel, in which I cover a variety of gaming topics, like analysis videos, such as this one. If you're into that, then press the link in the description. It's that simple.